I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, new worries about the flu and the measles here in San Diego.
Plus, there's just 1 month left to avoid a tax penalty for not having health insurance this year. I'm Peggy Pico with how much you can expect to pay if you miss the Affordable Care Act deadline. And the imaginary meal drug that can help you lose weight fast. Why Salk researchers say it works, at least in mice.
And we'll take a look at how Balboa Park's museums are celebrating a big anniversary this year. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. County Health Agency is reporting 2 more flu-related deaths tonight, in fact, over the past week, and they say the infection rate is more than double what it was this time last year. In all, 4 people have died here from this flu season, all of them in their 80s and all with underlying medical conditions. Health Department says more than 1,500 cases have been reported so far. Now, there were just over 700 at this time last year. The flu does become more prevalent here in January and February, so health officials are urging folks to get flu shots. Now, Sharp Reese Steely's urgent care in La Mesa closed this afternoon to quarantine 5 possible measles cases. Measles is highly contagious, and in recent days, health officials have been tracking more than 24 patients exposed to the disease at Disneyland. That happened last month. Sharp says anyone suspecting they may have the measles should contact their doctor or the county health department instead of going into the doctor's office or hospital. As expected today, the House voted to overturn President Obama's key immigration policies to protect millions from deportation and the Deferred Action Program known as DACA, aimed at immigrants brought to the U.S. illegally when they were children. Now, the votes were part of actions on a bill to finance the Homeland Security Department through this fiscal year. San Diego's congressional delegation voted along party lines, Democrats saying no to undoing the immigration policies, Republicans voting yes. House Speaker John Boehner says it's a matter of defending the Constitution.
Citizenship, legal residence for the undocumented youth. That was your idea, one that we applauded and we accepted and we cheered on. And 1 year later, you want to take away from 600,000 dreamers their right to live in this country and to live legal. You want to deport them all. What happened?
The House move to reverse DACA could keep the legislation from passing in the Senate. And even if the 2 measures do pass, President Obama says he will veto them. The Republican National Committee's annual winter meeting began today in Coronado at the Hotel Del with the theme of building on success. After taking control of Congress in November, GOP is looking ahead to the 2016 election. 4 potential presidential candidates will speak, including 2012 nominee Mitt Romney. Chula Vista has a full city council once again after a bit of drama during last night's meeting. Mayor Mary Salas walked out when it seemed council members wouldn't be able to agree on someone to fill her council seat. But they did finally agree on Chula Vista's Chamber of Commerce president, Steve Meissen. He will resign the chamber post to avoid a conflict of interest. The compromise lets Chula Vista avoid a $600,000 special election. More than 1 million people in California have signed up for health insurance with just a few weeks left to go before the deadline. The state is also ramping up advertising efforts to get more folks enrolled, and millions more are expected to sign up in the final weeks. Now, if you don't get health insurance by the February 15th deadline, you'll face a hefty tax penalty this year. Peggy Pico has more on what's at stake.
There's just 1 month left to sign up for health insurance through Covered California, the state's version of the Affordable Care Act that requires everyone to have medical insurance coverage. Joining me with information on the tax penalties for the remaining uninsured and how the ACA affects your taxes are my guest, Rafael Tolino with the IRS for Southern California and Nevada, and senior attorney Jack Daly for the Legal Aid Society of San Diego. And Jack, Covered California calls for a penalty. They call the penalty for not having health insurance by this February 15th deadline shared responsibility payment. How come they call it that?
Well, it's the idea that we all share some responsibility in certainly having health care and paying for health care and assuring that folks have efficient and quality health care. And if we don't all have health care, those things may not be possible.
Are there any exemptions to this?
Certainly. There's a whole list of exemptions on the IRS website and on the tax forms that you will be completing when completing your taxes. But some of the most common ones are short coverage gaps. If you have a short coverage gap of less than 3 months without health care, if you didn't get on health care in 2014 before May 1st, there's an exemption. Or if you had some other general hardship, I think those are the most common exemptions that will come up.
Okay, and there's a link for that on our website,
Absolutely.
kpbs.org, so people can look at that. Now, Raphael, if you're not exempt and you miss this February 15th deadline, what are the tax payments or penalties?
Well, the shared responsibility payment, if you don't have coverage and didn't get coverage and you should have had coverage, is either $95 per adult or half of that per child, $47.50, or 1% of your total household income above the filing threshold, whatever is greater. So, for example, if your whole household income was just, say, I don't know, $100,000, so that the filing threshold, let's say your married filing joint is just over $20,000, you take the difference, and it's 1% of that as a penalty. So it's either the $95 or $285, which is the cap for the 95, $47.50, or the greater of your household income above the filing threshold.
So it could be $1,000.
It depends on the tax circumstances around the taxpayer.
How does the IRS actually know if you have health insurance or not?
There's a lot of third-party behind-the-scenes sharing per what the law allows us to do accordingly to make sure we administer this accordingly. You're going to get a Form 1095-A from Covered California. If you purchase insurance through the marketplace that shows you the information you need to file an accurate return, chances are you got a premium tax credit in advance, so you'll do a little reconciliation there. But the majority of taxpayers are just going to check a box that says I had health care coverage either through an employer-sponsored plan or a government-sponsored plan such as Medicaid, Medicare, Medi-Cal, and be done with it.
And Jack, let's talk about the tax situation for those people getting government subsidies for their health insurance. What happens then?
Sure. So during 2014, if folks qualified, they were able to purchase health insurance off of the Covered California marketplace with the assistance of either a cost subsidy reduction or a advanced premium tax credit. If it turns out that at the end of the year you received too much tax credit, there will be a reconciliation process through the filing of your taxes for which they will repay that extra tax credit that you received. Conversely, if you receive too little tax credit, you will have that additional tax credit added to your refund.
I see. Now, Raphael, how will the IRS actually enforce, let's say, somebody who says, no, I didn't have health insurance? How will you enforce that? Will you garnish wages?
Well, one, we hope everybody puts accurate return on your taxes like everything else that goes on there. Two, basically your refund will be reduced by the amount of shared responsibility payment that you should have paid based on not having coverage.
And I'll ask this, do you happen to know, Jack, will the penalty increase exponentially each year that you don't have it, or next year particularly?
Yeah, it will increase, not necessarily exponentially. Like, for example, in 2014, it was 1% of your household income above the filing threshold. In 2015, it's going to be 2%, and then in 2016, 2.5%. So it will increase over the next several years. I think at some point it will level out. Perhaps in 2017.
Yeah, I don't know the law exactly going forward beyond that, but certainly.
But there is a penalty.
But there is a step increase in the next couple of years.
And it's not too early to file, correct? You're going to start.
Yeah, we're going to start processing returns next Tuesday, January 20th. That's when we'll actually start processing returns, and so get to a computer and get to e-filing, free filing as quickly as you can.
And there's still time. You have till February 15th to sign up for Covered California.
Right, that's
deadline, going forward, actually. So for folks that need health care in 2015, that would be the deadline to file their application going forward.
All right. Jack Daly and Raphael Tolino, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For 8 years, Reality Changers has held its State of the Inner City address on the same day San Diego's mayor gives his annual speech. But this year, they took a different approach in their mission to get low-income students off the streets and into college.
Welcome to my latest experiment. This is a big one, the one I've been waiting for all my life.
Taking a page from the movie Back to the Future, Reality Changers is rolling out a new way to raise money for the nonprofit.
Great Scott!
Tapping into what they call flux philanthropy, or using available school space after hours to provide tutoring and support to needy students.
So what we've done is we've shifted the burden of overhead costs away from the donors who hate to pay for overhead, away from the service provider who hates to admit that there's overhead, to the recipients of these services.
Located in City Heights, where it's estimated less than 3% of adults have college diplomas, Reality Changers has impacted the lives of hundreds of disadvantaged kids who've become the first in their families to go to college. Chris Yanoff started the program in 2001 with just 4 eighth-grade students and $300.
We've come a long way. In fact, this is our 15th school year, and those $300 have turned into over $60 million in scholarships for inner city kids coming from universities all across the country.
Schools ranging from Harvard, UCLA, and UC San Diego. By the end of this school year, nearly 1,000 kids from San Diego will have entered college thanks to Reality Changers, and the results speak for themselves.
Well, just last year, Reality Changers graduates earned an average of $59,000 per student. And the top third of those students earned $88,000 per graduate.
$88,000 per graduate! $88,000 per graduate!
Something to get excited about in a neighborhood where most adults don't even make it to college.
Of course, in Back to the Future in 2015, we were all supposed to be flying on hoverboards, not driving hybrids. Their goal is to raise $2 million to keep the program going. You can find out more on their website, realitychangers.org. There is a new effort in the North County to end veteran homelessness. 25 Cities is a local arm of a federal initiative trying to identify people in need and find long-term housing for them as quickly as possible. It's partly funded by a $5 million grant from the VA. 25 Cities takes a different tack toward ending homelessness by not requiring clients to be drug-free before they're placed in housing.
We find that those folks just cycle back through the system, and we spend money over and over and over instead of actually solving their homelessness very quickly and cutting down on that churn. The churn is really what's burning up a lot of the money that we need to solve everybody's homelessness and create a better system.
The 25 Cities approach is based on individual needs. Government agencies are partnering with community groups to launch it. There's an uptick in San Diego's housing market. The median home price is now $440,000. That's up from $420,000 a year ago. About 200 more homes sold during the same month last year. Other cities around the state saw similar results. Lower mortgage rates and job growth were credited for the recent housing gains. California's pension fund for state workers exceeded financial expectations, getting a higher rate of return on its investments, 77% compared to 70% from a year ago. But critics say less than 80% may keep the pension fund from meeting its financial obligations. State regulators have announced the nation's strictest rules on a widely used pesticide. Chloropicrin is injected into the ground before crops are planted, especially strawberries. Its makers say it cleans the soil, but the state says it causes health problems for farm workers and people who live near the fields. Those problems include headaches, coughing, and irritated eyes. The new rules say farmers can still use the chemical, but limits how much can be used in a day. Farmers say the new rules could mean higher prices. Salk researchers say they've developed a new type of diet pill that tricks the body into thinking it's already eaten. Peggy Pico finds out how this weight loss pill differs from other diet drugs.
Imagine your favorite dinner, complete with, say, a full-bodied glass of wine and perhaps dessert. Now imagine that you're full, but you haven't had one bite. And the scale shows it as your weight is dropping. That's the idea behind the imaginary meal drug Salk Institute researchers have been developing for human clinical trials. Here with the details are my guest, lead researcher Ron Evans, director of Salk's Gene Expression Laboratory, and Dr. Mark Jabro, a medical director specializing in obesity at Sharp Reese Steele Medical Center. And Ron, this diet pill fexaramine, or FEX for short, is said to fool the body into thinking that it's had this imaginary meal and that it's full and that you lose weight. How does it do that?
It triggers a natural process that occurs when you begin eating the first bite of a meal, which is a digestion process. And digestion, besides letting the food be absorbed into your body, actually there's a trigger in that process that signals the body that food's coming in. And our pill is that signal in a chemical form, so you don't need the food to actually trick the body into think that you've started eating a meal. And the body begins to respond to that process.
Let me talk specifics on this. Now, you've done 10 years of research, I understand, with this drug on obese and diabetic mice. There is such thing. They actually lost weight while eating a high-fat, high-calorie diet. Physically, if you could just briefly tell us, you know, the mechanism. Is it working just on the nerve? Is it working on the pancreas, insulin, and sugar levels as well?
The signal that it triggers in the gut begins to spread throughout the body. One of the impacts is on fat that causes a certain type of fat to begin to burn energy. It's a process called thermogenesis. So it stimulates that in the body. It also lowers insulin, lowers glucose. And so for diabetics, it has a double benefit. For people who are overweight, it has another kind of benefit, which is weight loss.
And I want to get back to that in just a sec, but I want to ask Dr. Jabro, there's only 4 FDA-approved prescription weight loss drugs here in the U.S. now. How do they work in comparison to this, and what are some of their side effects?
Well, the newest drug actually does work similar to this in that it's a gut hormone type of manipulation. It's actually a diabetic drug that's been reformulated to increase strength to improve satiety, or actually increase satiety. So that's coming. That's not quite on the market yet, but we do expect it within the next few months. The other drugs are all centrally acting. They work in the hypothalamus of the brain. They tend to work on the area of the brain that controls feeding and hunger, and also another area of the brain that tends to control reward eating, or that impulse to eat when we're not even hungry. So in contrast to this particular drug, we're talking about drugs working in the brain, and in some cases, the potential side effects of dealing with those targets.
And I understand, and I'll ask you this, Ron. So the side effects I think we're most familiar with are these heart things that have happened with people taking things like fen-phen in the past. What side effects does FEX have?
Well, one of the advantages of FEX is it doesn't get into the body, so it doesn't touch the brain, so you don't have depression that can be linked to that, or it doesn't touch the heart, so you don't get heart effects or heart palpitations. So we like the safety feature of a drug that just goes into your gut and then it passes right through. So it just touches the process that triggers that food would normally trigger, but it does this without needing the food.
So this leads to some, at least from what I've read, some pretty rapid weight loss. Now, Dr. Jabro, we've heard, many of us, that you should healthy weight loss is 2 pounds per week. Yeah. Is that true, or can you actually lose weight at any particular speed?
Well, I think the speed really is if you're monitored. We monitor patients in some of our programs, and we will actually allow them to lose quite a bit faster than that. So I think if you're looking at a patient, you're looking at their labs, and you're controlling their intake, you can actually lose quite a bit faster. So the speed is not really indicative of the ability to keep it off long term. And I think you can do rapid weight loss in a safe fashion.
And Ron, who do you think would benefit most if this drug goes to clinical trials, if it gets approved? Who would benefit most from this type of drug?
Well, most people in January are thinking about this diet, and they promised as one of their New Year's resolutions to try to lose weight. But I think really the people who are diabetic and obese are the classic target for this type of therapy. The morbidly obese, people who really have difficulty controlling appetite and weight loss would be very good targets as well.
All right, Ron Evans and Dr. Mark Jabro, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, a special report on how convicted sexual offenders in the military fall through the cracks once discharged. That's Wednesday on the PBS News Hour.
There was supposed to be a year-long party in Balboa Park this year for the 100th anniversary of the Panama, California Expo, which put San Diego and Balboa Park on the map. The city's big party fizzled, but KPBS reporter Angela Carone tells us museums in the park have a plan of their own.
Lots of animals, big and small. Whether on land, sea, or air, if they live in the San Diego region, they're featured in the Natural History Museum's new exhibit called Coast to Cactus. It's a walk through San Diego's diverse habitats.
I've never heard a coyote before.
A diorama of a family camping shows all the animals that roam the desert at night.
But it's got a pincher thing on its mouth.
Coast to Cactus is just one of the special museum exhibits planned for the 2015 Centennial Celebration. Peter Comiskey is the executive director of the Balboa Park Partnership.
The day-to-day programming of 2015 was always going to be the wonderful exhibitions and programs within the museums and different institutions. So that was all planned years ago.
That programming has taken on added importance. For years, city officials and Balboa Park leaders fretted over how to celebrate the centennial anniversary. A group of politically well-connected individuals were given 3 years and a healthy city budget to plan a party. That resulted in, well, nothing. Nothing, that is, except a stack of bills from consultants. Now the museums are filling much of the void. Take the San Diego Model Railroad Museum. A team of designers is building a Centennial Garden Railway.
Come up and then level.
Soon this bare landscape will feature a model train rolling through a miniature version of 1915 Balboa Park. Anthony Reidenhauer is the museum's director.
We're going to create 6 of the elements from the 1915 exposition, as well as the old trolley terminus, the California Tower, the Oregon Pavilion. All of these buildings are going to be in our miniature park, our garden railway.
There are some events happening outdoors, too. Michael Ruiz is the city's district manager for Balboa Park 2015. He says the park buildings will sometimes be lit in different colors at night.
So special occasions, unique events throughout the year, we want to be able to color the Prado with various colors to really make it a special occasion for the Centennial.
Some groups are frustrated with the city's oversight of the Centennial celebration. David London says he has 700 volunteers ready to transform Balboa Park to 1915.
A lot of people in period costume, period music. We were going to have groups from the Women's Museum and then other groups arguing the rights of women to vote, whether we should enter the Great War that became World War I. In 1915, that was going on in Europe, but we weren't in it yet. So to really kind of recreate the time and place and feel.
London says the city hasn't made it easy to pull this off. In fact, he can't get a date reserved for his event. Now his group plans to descend on the park in April like a 1915 flash mob. Meanwhile, Ruiz says there will be music in the Plaza de Panama during the summer.
We're looking at the Centennial as that opportunity to invite musicians to be able to perform in the park and highlight our local talent.
As you can see, it's a centennial celebration on a modest scale, but still a year of special events. To find out which ones you want to see, go to celebratebalboapark.org. Angela Carone, KPBS News.
Video journalist Katie Shulov helped produce that story. It's part of a year-long series we're presenting on KPBS called Balboa Park, Heart of San Diego. The movie Unbroken is based on a World War II veteran story of being held in a Japanese prisoner of war camp. Today in San Diego, there was a private showing for some local vets who were also POWs. KPBS reporter Susan Murphy was there.
14 World War II POWs and their families gathered at the Ultrastar Cinema in Mission Valley to see Unbroken. The war movie tells the survival story of Olympic runner and prisoner of war veteran Louis Zamperini.
I think we were fortunate to have been able to live through it, and that's what Zamperini did too.
Ralph Kling was a fighter pilot during World War II. He became a prisoner after his plane was shot down over Luxembourg on September 21st, 1944.
It was a very difficult 4 days and 4 nights in the snow.
Kling says he nearly starved to death.
So we knew that that's the march. You carry what you could to eat off of. And we got no German food for those 4 days. And one meal after that, and then we were on trains for 3 days.
I'm lucky to be alive.
Robert Farner says he can relate to Zamperini. Farner was an infantry marine in World War II when he was captured by the Japanese on May 6, 1942.
I call it 3.5 years in hell.
Like Zamperini, Farner says he too was severely tortured.
Here comes this Jap sergeant out with about a 5-foot iron bar, rebar, and started beating right across the back. I thought, oh gosh, you broke my back and knocked me out.
Air Corpsman Francis Berger's plane was shot down over Poland on October 13, 1944. He says POWs share a special bond.
Prisoner is always a prisoner.
Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
We've got warm weather in the forecast, sunny along the coast, temperatures mostly in the 70s, about the same in the Inland Valley, temperatures though dipping into the mid-40s at night. Clear but warm, not as warm though in the mountains, with a slight warm up into the 60s on Saturday, and 70s in the desert too, with lows in the 40s. Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, we'll have highlights of San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer's State of the City address and this year's Oscar nominations. And a few minutes ago, you saw a bit of the Coast to Cactus exhibit at the Natural History Museum. On KPBS Midday Edition at noon tomorrow, we'll talk with the folks who put it together. Tonight's stories are online at kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. You have a great night.